A brand new edition of the Valley's most in-depth geeky weather forecast video. Of course, it's called Weather for Weather Geeks on this Wednesday evening. We're going to crank up the heat big time over the next week to 10 days. That's going to be our big weather story going into mid-June. But in the near term, boy, the weather's awfully nice, and it's gotten a little bit dry. We talked about this some on Weather Geeks last evening, that you may not be mowing as often as you had to earlier in the spring and early summer. Of course, spring was pretty wet for a while in March and, in early April. And in fact, it stayed kind of wet through the rest of April and into early May. We, at the airport, had 1.02 inches more than average for that 30-day period. But the most recent 30 days, from March 12th or 13th through today's date, we're running a deficit of 0.61 inches at the airport. And of course, your mileage can vary on these rainfall totals. These are the official numbers in Vienna at the airport, but some have had a little bit more, some have had a little bit less. And region-wide, our soil moisture has decreased a lot over the last month. This is a look at the 1 month difference in the soil moisture in kind of the top 3 feet of the soil. And so while we're not slipping into a drought, at least not yet, the soil has gotten a lot drier in Ohio and all of Pennsylvania as well since the middle of the month of May. When we look at kind of the broad or the large scale or large time frames here for the month, the season, the year, we still are running some surpluses here for the year, of course, but the season, meteorological summer, we're running almost an inch behind the average. And I don't see a lot of rain coming our way over the next 7 days. So some of these numbers are going to continue to change in the hotter pattern during mid-month. But it's a delightful Wednesday evening across the valley. The sun is shining. We have dew points in the very comfortable category, upper 40s to around 50. Once we're into summer, we consider that to be a real treat. Nationwide, 2 trouble spots this evening. One with a severe thunderstorm watch up here across Minnesota. But the bigger trouble spot, by all estimations here, are in Florida. The trouble spots, I should say, are in Florida, where the rain continues to just come down hot and heavy. This is a fire hose of tropical moisture aimed at parts of the southern Florida peninsula and parts of the Keys as well. And flash flood emergencies have been out for several hours around the greater Miami, Fort Lauderdale areas. This is kind of the highest end flash flood warning that the National Weather Service offices in the United States issue. This is what they call a flash flood emergency, and usually these are issued where flooding is occurring. It's substantial flooding, and it tends to be in a populated area. So you see these flash flood emergencies a lot in urban areas as opposed to more rural areas where there's fewer people. And, drainage can be an issue in a lot of urban areas as opposed to some rural areas. And yeah, just over the last 24 hours, the rainfall totals here have been really, really impressive. Now, some of this has fallen where not a lot of people live, out towards the Everglades. And, there's very few people that live in kind of the central part of the southern Florida peninsula. But there's already been some double-digit rainfall totals out there. And where that flash flood emergency has been issued, double-digit amounts, pretty common. Miami Beach on northward towards the Fort Lauderdale area. Back here in eastern Ohio and western PA, another winter on Thursday, more summertime sunshine, and we'll get off to a warmer start, and it's going to be a warmer afternoon. Now, this is nothing compared to what we'll be dealing with next week, but still, we'll be in the lower 60s at daybreak. By 8 a.m., we're already in the mid-60s. By lunchtime, we're in the 80s. I don't think we'll hit 90 in most spots on Thursday, but we could hit 87 or even 88 in some places with lots of summertime sunshine. This will be another day just like today, just a little bit warmer, a fine summer day, especially if you like it a little on the warm side. Great pool weather for the afternoon. Now, this next front approaching is a weak one, and while it may kick off some heavy gusty storms tomorrow into tomorrow night in parts of Illinois and Indiana especially, not expecting that to translate eastward. We expect not much more than a scattering of fairly run-of-the-mill showers and storms from about daybreak Friday through about mid-afternoon on Friday. This front will clear the area before the afternoon is through. Should be a delightful Friday evening with low dew points like we have this evening, probably even a little cooler than it is this evening. So a great Friday evening, maybe take dinner outside. The weekend will feature lots of sun as this high builds in, and the heat will become more and more the story, of course, as we go towards Father's Day and beyond. Chances are, if you're watching this video, you know this factoid that in our part of the country, in our latitude, we generally consider a heat wave to be 3 or more consecutive days with highs in the 90s. That's not the definition they use in places like Atlanta, where it's in the 90s all summer, but in our part of the country, 3 or more days, we consider that to be a heat wave. The forecast for next week Features highs in the 90s, not only Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but probably Thursday and Friday as well. When's the last time we strung together 5 straight days with highs in the 90s? Well, it's been since 2020, in July of 2020, just after the 4th of July. We had from the 5th through the 9th highs in the 90s. We haven't had a 6-day heat wave since the very hot summer of 1995. That was in August, that particular heat wave. That heat wave killed a lot of people out in Chicago, especially, because the air quality was so poor and the heat was just relentless that summer in parts of the Midwest. Around here, it was bad, but it was much, much worse in other parts of the region. That was in the summer of 1995. All right, so if you remember our summer forecast put out a few weeks ago, we called for strong odds of this being a warmer than average summer. That's already shaping up to be the case. I don't see a lot of cool weather on any of the modeling in the foreseeable future. Now, of course, cool weather in summer does not mean cold. It means just cooler than the average, which means it could mean, by midsummer highs of 78 degrees. But I don't see a lot of that advertised by any modeling going out over the next month or so. And part of our summer forecast was, hey, we think this summer is going to be on the drier side. Strongest odds near to below average precipitation. The way it's looking now for the next month, looking fairly dry. This number, might need to be a little bit higher. Now, that being said, I think we'll probably get into a pattern at some point as this heat wave starts to wane a little bit, at least the worst of it, in about 10 days from now. That could be a danger zone where as the ridge starts retreating a little bit more to the west, you get some ridge-riding thunderstorms. During the peak of this heat wave, early to middle next week, I don't see a lot of thunderstorms. I can't rule one out popping up in the afternoon anytime next week, but organized clusters of storms, mesoscale convective systems, MCSs, or the D word, derecho, that is not something we expect underneath this ridge next week. But as the ridge retreats and the heat starts to be trimmed a little bit, again, that's probably towards the end of next week into the following weekend. That could be a little bit of a trouble spot, and that's something we'll be watching at times this summer. While it may end up being a drier than average summer, we could have an increased risk this summer of those long-lived thunderstorm clusters riding around the top of a ridge of high pressure centered somewhere in the middle of the country. So, of course, we'll have more updates on longer-range trends on future editions of Weather for Weather Geeks. Thanks for watching this evening. I'll see you right back here on Thursday.